right now, somewhere in your closet. There's a jacket you haven't worn in months. You own more clothes than you'll ever actually need, and yet you still feel naked without them. That feeling isn't really about temperature. It isn't really about modesty either. It goes back much further than either of those things, to a version of you that had no fabric at all, and somehow survived anyway. So what was it actually like? Not the cartoon version, not the caveman in a loincloth version. What did your body have to do every single day before clothing existed? The answer starts with fur, or rather, the strange lack of it. Humans are famously one of the few mammals with almost no body hair. Most primates are covered in it. We're not. For a long time, scientists weren't entirely sure why, but the leading explanation is about cooling, not comfort. Biologist Nina Jablonski has spent much of her career studying human skin, and her research points to a very specific trade-off. Early humans on the African savanna needed to run and hunt during the hottest parts of the day, when most predators were resting. To do that without overheating, the body needed a way to dump heat, fast. Thick fur traps heat. Bare skin covered in sweat glands releases it. So evolution made a bet. Lose the fur, gain the ability to sweat efficiently, and survive the heat that other animals couldn't. But losing fur came with a cost. Skin without fur is skin exposed directly to sunlight, and exposed skin burns. And burned skin can lead to skin cancer. And skin cancer can kill you before you ever pass on your genes. So the same evolutionary pressure that stripped away your fur also darkened your skin, packing it with melanin as a kind of built-in sunscreen. You weren't just losing a coat. You were trading it for a completely different survival system, one written directly into your skin instead of worn over it. For a while, that system alone might have been enough. Warm climate, dark skin, no fur, no problem. But humans didn't stay in warm climates, and that's where things get interesting. As early humans began moving into colder regions, further from the equator, bare skin stopped being an advantage and started being a liability. You can't sweat your way out of freezing. At some point, something had to change. And it wasn't your biology this time. It was your behavior. This is where clothing enters the story, and it enters it far earlier than most people assume. You might picture clothing as something that shows up alongside farming, pottery, and permanent settlements, a relatively recent invention. It isn't. Evolutionary biologist Mark Stoneking co-led a genetic study on human body lice, which sounds like an unusual place to look for the origin of clothing. But it turns out to be one of the clearest windows we have into it. Body lice can only survive in clothing. They can't live directly on human skin the way head lice can. So by tracing when body lice genetically diverged from head lice, researchers could estimate, roughly, when humans started regularly wearing something. The findings pointed to somewhere around 170,000 years ago. Tens of thousands of years before agriculture, before villages, long before anything we'd recognize as civilization. Think about what that means. For a huge stretch of human history, clothing wasn't decoration. It wasn't identity. It was the only thing standing between a hairless, heat-adapted body and a climate actively trying to kill it. And once it existed, clothing didn't just protect the body. It appears to have changed the trajectory of the species. Archaeologist Ian Gilligan has argued that clothing may have been one of the key technologies that allowed modern humans to expand out of Africa and survive in colder parts of Europe and Asia, regions that would have been lethal to a bare-skinned primate. Without insulation, humans simply couldn't have pushed into those environments and lasted through winter. Clothing wasn't a comfort item. It was infrastructure. It was, in a very real sense, a second skin that let a tropical animal live in an Arctic world. But here's the detail that tends to surprise people. Early clothing wasn't woven. There was no fabric, no needle and thread as we'd recognize it, Not yet. The earliest coverings were almost certainly animal hides, worn as simple wraps, tied or draped rather than sewn. Later, evidence of actual sewing needles, crafted from bone, starts appearing in the archaeological record, and that's a genuinely important shift. A tied hide can slip, gap, let cold air in. A sewn garment, shaped to the body, traps warmth far more effectively. The invention of the needle wasn't just a tool upgrade. It was arguably one of the reasons humans could survive an ice age at all. So picture it. Not a person in a single loincloth standing in the sun, but a person wrapped and stitched into layered hide, moving through snow that would have killed their bare-skinned ancestors within hours. The gap between those two images is the gap between extinction and survival for entire populations of early humans. Now here's where the ancient starts to explain the modern, and it might make you look at your own closet differently. You still feel that same instinct today, the discomfort of exposed skin in the cold, the vague unease of being unclothed in public, even when there's no actual danger present. That reaction isn't purely cultural. It's layered on top of something much older, something that once meant the difference between living through a winter and not. Your ancestors who felt that discomfort and did something about it, wrapped themselves, found hides, made coverings, were the ones who survived to pass that instinct down to you. And it goes further than survival. Once clothing existed, it didn't stay purely functional for long. Researchers studying the archaeological record have found early evidence of decoration alongside the practical hides, pierced shell beads, ochre pigment. Marks that suggest early humans weren't just wearing coverings to stay alive. They were also using them to say something. Clothing became one of the very first surfaces for identity, a way to signal group, status, or individuality, long before anything like written language existed. That's a strange thing to sit with. The same object that kept a species from freezing to death also became one of the first ways humans expressed who they were. Practical and symbolic, stitched into the same piece of hide. So when you reach for a jacket without thinking about it, or feel a flicker of unease imagining yourself with nothing on in a cold room, you're not just responding to today's weather. You're running a program that's roughly 170,000 years old. One written into your instincts by ancestors who didn't have the luxury of ignoring the cold. They didn't have fabric. They didn't have needles at first. They had hides, ingenuity, and a body that had already gambled its fur away for a different kind of survival. Clothing was the patch for that gamble, the thing that let a nearly hairless primate walk into snow and come out the other side. Somewhere in your closet, there's a jacket you haven't worn in months. It's easy to forget what it represents. But every time you put one on without thinking, you're doing something your ancestors couldn't do casually. You're finishing a decision they made 170,000 years ago. One thread, one hide, one cold night at a time.